Hello again, everybody. My name is Gray Oldenburg, and welcome back to the Jungle Show, where we talk Auburn basketball 52 weeks out of the year. In this episode, this is our fourth edition of the Jungle Show. In this episode, we'll be talking about all things NBA draft lottery coming up on Tuesday night on May 17th. We'll talk about the odds for teams to get the number one pick and what kind of impact that makes on the two Auburn guys projected in the first round of the NBA draft. We'll also go through um, my mock draft that I put on auburndaily.com and talk about some of the impact picks, see where the Auburn guys landed, and what kind of impact that makes on this year's program and their careers. Um, and we'll also go through in a short discussion. We'll also talk about Julian Phillips going to Tennessee, what impact that makes, not just on NIL, but Auburn basketball and this next year's team. All that and more next. Hello again, everybody, and we're back for the fourth edition of the Jungle Show. Today, it is just myself for the second time and just our fourth one. Uh, Chris, my dad, will be back next week. So we have decided. So I've decided to push back the individual player articles and going through and talk about each individual player for the next year. That will start next week. We'll start with Zeb Jasper. I'll get that article up on Thursday at auburndaily.com. And we'll be able to talk about each week. We'll have an article to go through and talk about each individual player. But I know Dad wants to, or Chris wants to be there for that. So we wanted to push it back because this one is just me. And today we've decided to talk about a lot about the NBA draft lottery, which is Tuesday, May 17th. And we'll go through my mock draft that I did on auburndaily.com. I did that. I did a whole first round 32 or 30 team mock draft and had both Auburn guys going in the first round. And we'll talk about some of the picks about that and where they ended up and what kind of impact that makes on Auburn basketball and their NBA careers. But first, let's talk about first. I'll go over what's happening at auburndaily.com. You can find all the stuff on auburndaily.com, or you can find us on Twitter at SI_Auburn. Some absolutely incredible stuff going down at auburndaily.com and on the Auburn Daily YouTube channel, which is where we are. We go live every Friday at 6 p.m. now on the Auburn Daily YouTube channel, the Auburn Daily Facebook page, and the Auburn Daily Twitch stream. So, and in the description of the Auburn Daily YouTube channel of this, and in the description down below in the Facebook, I have linked the 2022 mock draft article that I wrote on auburndaily.com. That way, you can go ahead and pull up the article, or if you're watching the replay, you can watch it and go through the article when we start going through the mock draft here in a little bit. But first, let's do a quick discussion real quick, and I'm going to keep this as, let's say, factual as possible. I want to stay away from getting upset about this sort of thing. But Julian Phillips announced yesterday on Thursday that he will attend the University of Tennessee instead of Auburn. He had his final seven. He had Auburn, Florida State, South Carolina, USC, and Tennessee. And then the two pro options, the G League and the Overtime Elite. And, we saw a major push. He visited Auburn. We saw a major push by Auburn to get him to use that last scholarship spot for Julian Phillips, who's a former LSU commit. But now and we'll talk about this more in a future episode. We'll have a segment where Chris and I go back and forth on NIL, what kind of impacts that's making on Auburn recruiting. and also what the pro choices impacts are making as well. That's made an impact for not just this previous year, but the year before and the year before. So as long as those are an option, those will continue to be threats to Auburn basketball targets. And it will continue to be options for those high end type talents coming out of high school. But Julian Phillips decides to go to Tennessee, and he was offered, I believe on Wednesday, he was offered 800,000 to come to the G League, and he declined it. He declined it. And I don't know a high school player who, and I understand, look, college is a much better option than the pro. And you see that with guys like Jabari Smith. Jabari Smith was like the 7th or 8th recruit in the country, and he's going to go in and be the number 1 pick in this year's draft. And we'll get on that more in a little bit. But Julian Phillips was supposedly, this is not factual, I've heard this on many different platforms, was given a $2.1 million on an NIL offer from a collective or a company from Tennessee to come play basketball for them for 1 year. I think that needs to be fixed. That's something that needs to be handled with. Look, that's not good. And the NCAA is trying to crack down on that with the new collective, and they can't involve boosters. Boosters cannot directly impact recruiting, and they shouldn't be able to impact recruiting, especially with their money and with, if they want to impact recruiting, they should be able to go up and get, do facilities or help with whatever, do what boosters do, not just outright pay the player to have an NIL deal with them just to come play basketball or football or whatever, or anything at their school. And I think that's a perfect example of what happened here with Tennessee and Julian Phillips. $2.1 million. There's not a 18-year-old, 19-year-old kid in America that would not accept that to go play basketball for 1 year at Tennessee. I would. And I despise Tennessee. I would. Which is ridiculous. And we will talk about in a future episode, and we kind of want to get thoughts, from others, whether on Twitter. You can get my Twitter right here at Gray Oldenburg, or my dad's Twitter, Chris, at War Eagle Hoops. You can comment in the YouTube comments, whatever. Reach us out. Who do you think should be Auburn's last scholarship that they add? We have one more scholarship to add before the start of next year. Who do you want? Who could you realistically see being that last scholarship? Is it a guard? Is it a shooter? Is it a spot-up shooter? Is it another forward? Maybe a more scoring threat at the forward rather than a defensive guy? Is it another freshman? Who do you want to see right there? And the transfer portal is the perfect way to go get that. And Bruce has shown an incredible job of handling the transfer portal and doing such a great job with that. But let's get right into our talk about the NBA draft and the NBA draft lottery coming up on Tuesday. Look, the NBA draft lottery has changed so much from when it was added, when it was the ping pong balls or the big sheets of paper in that spherical thing that they used to spin around and pull out and get odds or chances. You have so many ping pong balls in there to get that pick. And it's the same thing, just a more computer-esque, a more nowadays type of thing. And the odds are different. The odds are different than they were 3 years ago. I think this started 3 years ago. All the worst 3 teams in the NBA record-wise have a tie for the best odds at the number 1 pick, and then it just goes down the line. So the 3 worst teams and the 3 teams that have those odds to get the number 1 pick in the draft on Tuesday, Houston, Orlando, and Detroit. All 3 of those were destinations that I could have seen. I wrote in my article the 5 best destinations for Jabari Smith. All three of them had the same odds to get the number 3 pick or number 1 pick. And then Oklahoma City has a 12.5%. But Houston, Orlando, and Detroit have a 14% chance. And that's considerable, or that's huge, but it's not as big as it used to be. The worst team used to have a 25% chance to get the number 1 pick, and then it dropped to like 12 right after. But now we've got 14, 14, and 14. And then the fourth worst team in the NBA, which is the Oklahoma City Thunder, which is another team that I wrote in that article, the 5 best destinations for Jabari Smith, which you can go find at auburndaily.com, is Oklahoma City at 12.5%. And then you got Indiana, which is the 5th team that I wrote for the best landing spots for Jabari Smith in that article. Indiana is the 5th worst team. They have a 10.5. And then it just goes down the line. You got Portland, Sacramento, the Lakers, the Spurs. You got Washington Wizards. You got the New York Knicks, the Los Angeles Clippers, the Charlotte Hornets, and the Cleveland Cavaliers are all in the lottery this year. And they all have lower odds to get that number 1 pick, but all teams have a chance, especially the first 4 teams have a chance to get a top 4 pick. You have to be able to jump into that top 4. And the science behind getting a top 4 pick, if you are not projected a top 4 in terms of odds, is weird. And it's happened in the past. It happened with the Lakers a few years ago. It happened another time. I forget when it happened again. But just like Detroit has odds, has a really good odds to get a top 4 pick. Cleveland also has odds to get a top 4 pick. Charlotte also has odds to get a top 4 pick. So do the Clippers, so do the Knicks. They just don't have as good of an odds to get. But you need to jump into that top 4, based on percentage or whatever. You need to be able to jump in their top 4 to get a top 4 pick. Otherwise, you are going to be sitting exactly where you were in the projections. So there's a whole science and computer algorithm by the way that they do this, and the way that the odds are calibrated are just based off of record of this past year. And I will be writing an article that will be coming out. Hopefully it will be coming out before the lottery on the best case scenario, a breakdown of the best case scenarios for Jabari Smith. What is the best case? What is the best thing that could happen in the NBA draft lottery that would benefit Jabari Smith in the best way possible, or even benefit a guy like Walker Kessler? And I will be writing that article. It'll be out before the lottery. So those are the draft odds. And I went and did an entire, just like I said earlier, an entire mock draft on auburndaily.com. On those odds, I just kind of went through and plugged those odds, no crazy jumps up into the top 4. I just kind of did that. And I included what we know as of right now, what the trades are, who has whose pick or what, anything like that. So why don't we're going to go through and look at some of the impact picks in the mock draft. And just like I said earlier, I linked it down below in the description, in the Facebook description, or the YouTube description. You can follow along with us if you're watching live, or if you're watching anywhere on the replay. So in the odds, just like I said, Houston has the number 1 pick. And I think that would be absolutely an unbelievable case for Jabari Smith. And that's exactly what I did. I picked Jabari Smith to go to Houston. I did write in my article in early April, I wrote that Houston is one of the best teams for Jabari Smith. They had a really good young guard core. They had the 2nd overall pick this past year in Jalen Green, who has showed extreme promise, and Auburn fans have a history with Jalen Green, almost committing to the Tigers before going to the G League. and the G League not being his final two, and his final two was Memphis and Auburn, and that whole mess. But I think it would be an unbelievable fit for Jabari, being able to develop not just with Jalen Green and and guys, but also full front court guys like Christian Wood are there. They also got guys like Kevin Porter Jr., but they're not the youngest team. They have Dennis Schroeder, they have John Wall, they have some guys that you need to be able to develop the young guys like Jabari Smith, Christian Wood, Jalen Green. That's exactly what they've built there at Houston. But I will go ahead. I need to get back to the mock draft real quick. So I wrote in the mock draft here, as I said, look, I think Smith is the most NBA ready player in the NBA draft. I think you combine his shooting ability, his height, his length, all of his measurables, his age. He's younger than most of the guys in this NBA draft already, even if they were freshmen. He's younger because he reclassified and came to Auburn a year earlier than his original class was set for. NBA teams are going to they're just going to drool all over Jabari Smith because of all the things you combine into his game. I think he's the best shooter in the draft. I think there's some close ones. I think Christian Braun from Kansas is up there. But Christian Braun isn't 6'10" and athletic like Jabari Smith. Jabari Smith is – look, we talked about him in the Jabari Smith episode where I did myself. I talked all about what Jabari Smith brought to Auburn and what kind of impact he made coming to Auburn and playing as well as he did, and the accolades he brought with him while he was a Tiger. But he is just getting started. This is just the beginning for Jabari Smith, and this NBA draft lottery and NBA draft on June 23rd will be huge to tell his season, his development, his future and career in the NBA. I have him going number one. A lot of people do have him going number one. I think there's a consensus top four. And I think that top four is Jabari Smith, Paolo Banchero from Duke, the freshman, the 6'10", 250 freshman. I think he's as raw as of a player as we've ever seen come out of Duke. I think if you build him into that kind of body, then he could be really good. I don't think he is as refined as Jabari Smith, though. I think Jaden Ivey is up there in that top four. I think it all depends on who is picking first, who is picking second or third or fourth or whatever, and what they need and what they see in not only the NBA Combine, which will be well after the lottery, which we'll know who picks this time next week. We'll know the top 16 picks in the draft or the top 14 picks in the draft, something like that. And I think Jaden Ivey from Purdue is up there. But he's the only guard that's up here in this top four, because I think the only other one that competes in that top four is Chet Holmgren from Gonzaga. Just his length and guard ability at 7 foot it's spectacular, but he's also not filled into that body yet. He's also extremely raw like Banchero is. So it just depends. Some of the impact picks, I said we were going to go through and talk about the impact pick. I just said my top four. I have Houston taking Jabari Smith. I have Orlando taking Paolo Banchero, and Detroit go with Jaden Ivey to pair with Cade Cunningham. And then I have Oklahoma City, who has I think Oklahoma City has 3 first-round picks, and they're not the only team that has 3 first-round picks. San Antonio also has 3 first-round picks in this year's draft, that's crazy. That's insane to me. I have Oklahoma City going with Chet Holmgren. I think Oklahoma City is a team that could use anything possible. I just think they need bodies. They need guys. They need draftees. They need new players on that team. And there's a lot of teams in this, top 15, top 20, even top 20 that just need the best player available. And I think it just depends, especially with a guy like Walker Kessler. And I can scroll down here and look at the mock draft. I have Walker Kessler going to one of my teams that I wrote in the 5 best locations fit for Walker Kessler article on auburndaily.com. I had him going 18th to the Chicago Bulls. And look, I love that fit. Just like I said in the article and in last week's episode, where it was all about Walker Kessler, I love the fit of Walker fitting, coming behind or playing behind Nikola Vucevic in Chicago, playing alongside guys like Kobe White, Zach LaVine, Lonzo Ball, Alex Caruso, DeMar DeRozan. If he decides to stay in Chicago, that would be a great fit for Walker Kessler. So I have him going there, 18th. But I do have, let's see, I want to count how many centers I have going over Walker Kessler. And it's not a lot. I think if you count Chet Holmgren as a center, we will, for the sake of counting right now. But I have 1, 2, 3 guys going over Walker Kessler that are centers, and I think all 3 of them bring a different kind of situation to that team of where they were drafted. I think if you count Holmgren, his guard ability, just like I said a minute ago, I think is self-explanatory when it comes to bringing something to a team. I think that length and outside ability is what Oklahoma City needs if they do need a specific thing. Another guy that I have going ahead of Walker Kessler, I have Jalen Duren going to Charlotte at pick number 13. I think the big thing that attracts me to pick Duren over Kessler is his size. He's not as tall. He's 2 inches shorter, but Duren is also 260 pounds, and he is all muscle. Walker Kessler is not that, and I'm not saying he can't be that, but he is not that yet. Walker is not a guy that you look at and you go, oh, he's extremely thin, just like I would say that about Chet Holmgren, but he's not a guy you want to bang with Joel Embiid or Nikola Jokic or any of those back to the basket centers that are perfect for that post game. And that Patrick Ewing-esque or Hakeem Olajuwon type of post presence. I also have Mark Williams going over Walker Kessler. I think from Duke. I think I have him going to the Atlanta Hawks, and I think Mark Williams resembles Clint Capella more than Walker Kessler does. I think Mark is a more NBA guy that would be attracted to the NBA more specifically due to his athleticism and measurables, rather to a guy like Walker Kessler. I think Kessler is going to be all about fit, and I think that's perfect for him going to Chicago, as well as Jabari going first to the Houston Rockets. So later on in the NBA draft, those are all the Auburn guys that are in the NBA draft. Right? Obviously, Alan Flanagan and Dylan Cardwell are currently going through the draft process, but they have not declared for the NBA draft. But those are the guys that I have going. I think when you get later in the rounds, I think you could see better fits I think you could see as good of fits for Walker Kessler. I think it depends on where Chicago lands. And as of right now, Chicago would be the 18th pick. I think, Atlanta would be a perfect, I'm not going to say that's a perfect fit, but I will say that would be a good look. Be aware of Atlanta. Right now they're picking 16th, which is just outside of the lottery. I think Atlanta would be fun, especially after Clint Capella's injury. I think, him going back towards home, to the Atlanta area, I think that'd be fun. I think if he drops enough, and a lot of people do have him when in the mock drafts. When I was researching for doing this mock draft, a lot of people do have him drop into a team like Milwaukee, another team that I wrote in that article, the 5 best locations for Walker Kessler. I think Milwaukee is a great fit as well. I could see him in a Bucks uniform. I really could, but I think the fit of him playing alongside Giannis or backing up a guy like Brook Lopez, then being able to move Bobby Portis over to his more natural position at the power forward, and playing alongside, decent guards that could get him looks at alley oops and that sort of thing, but being able to just sit behind a more offensive center in Brook Lopez and come off the bench and be that exact presence or be that big defensive presence in the paint for uh, for Milwaukee as well. He could be for Chicago, another team that if he falls, I think he could fit at. We don't know where this team will be at yet, but the Miami Heat currently will be at the number 27th pick right now. I think that'd be a very interesting fit. He's again, just like I said, being able to sit behind Nikola Vucevic at Chicago or Brook Lopez at Milwaukee, but being able to sit behind Bam Adebayo, who's very young, the guy out of Kentucky, more offensively and guard oriented big. He's more of a newer big that we're seeing in the NBA nowadays. But being able to sit behind Bam Adebayo and again be that same presence that he would be in Chicago or Milwaukee, but being able to learn for a guy like Bam Adebayo while also playing alongside, Jimmy Butler, Tyler Hero, Kyle Lowry, guys like that. So we will go ahead and wrap this up. You can check all the stuff out on auburndaily.com, or if you want to check out this My Draft article, you can go check it out. I left the link in the description below on YouTube and Facebook. You can just find it there, or you can go find it. I'll post it on my Twitter right here at Gray Oldenburg. Right after this show ends, right after the show ends, I'll tweet it out again in case you want to go find it there. Look out for more articles coming on auburndaily.com. Next week I expect to have 2 articles up. I'm going to get before the lottery. I'm going to get the breakdown of the best scenarios for Jabari Smith in terms of the lottery. I think if Houston or Orlando or anything like that falls at the number 1 pick, I think that's a great scenario for Jabari Smith. And I'll talk more about that in that article. And then the preview of Zep Jasper, or as some people know him, Jep Zasper. We'll get that up around Thursday, probably. I'll get that up to y'all on auburndaily.com. That way, when Chris gets back on next Friday at 6 p.m., we can start our series on all the individual guys. And we'll go by academic class and start with Zep Jasper, the big super senior point guard from the College of Charleston. That's my guy. So we'll go ahead and get out of here. Again, you can find me on Twitter at Gray Oldenburg, or find all the stuff on auburndaily.com, or on Twitter at SI_Auburn. You can find my dad, my partner, Chris, who couldn't be with us this week, but will be with us next week, on Twitter at War Eagle Hoops. And thank y'all for watching. God bless.